Hi, everybody. It is time for another episode of the Grants and Contracts podcast. If you are joining us live, my name is Abraham.
And I'm Lainey. Welcome back. We're so excited to have you. If you will post your comment of where you're joining us from, what your business is, and what you're excited to learn from this today. I am back in the lovely state of Georgia. I know if you were with us last week, I was out of town, and so I was joining us from Destin, Florida. But I am back and excited to be back. We're having some pretty nice weather here. How about you, Abe?
I don't know if you got any work done while you were in Destin. Did you do any work at all? You just kind of enjoy the beaches.
Yes, I did do work. It was very windy and the weather wasn't the best, but the view is amazing. So looking out my window, finishing some things up. So it was really nice.
Well, good. I had a productive week too. But if you're just joining us, we are going to be talking about lots of different things that's happening in the government market. We're going to talk about the tariffs. We're going to talk about contract termination, what to do if your contract is terminated, and some strategies around that. And then we're going to talk about the potential government shutdown and how that can impact small businesses. So lots of different current events happening in the government market that we're going to address some of those things there, like SBA maybe closing them off some offices and moving them to different locations. So stay tuned. We'll be covering a lot of stuff. And if you're watching this on replay, welcome to this session here. And please don't forget to like, click on the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel at the same time.
Yes. So there's been a lot of stuff going on in the news. So I know we kind of go over some current events, especially when it's affecting us, our clients. We're in government contracting, so anything that happens in the government directly normally affects what we're doing. And so we're kind of going to explain some of the things that have been happening. Me and Abe were just talking about it's so funny with current events and news. I feel like you can refresh the page and something new comes out like every second. So it's hard to stay, so current up to date because we can read something last night and it's changed by this morning. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on, Abe. We've got this so-called tariff war. We've got a lot of stuff that's been happening with Canada now. This morning, some European stuff that's happening. We've seen a lot of stuff come out with the SBA. What are you thinking about everything? What is your view on just everything that's happened in the last just few days? I mean, this isn't even, past week, just last day or two.
Well, one, so I'm going to speak, from the small business perspective, because as the Government Contract Association, we're here to support the small business community. So with the shifting landscape of whether it's tariffs or no tariffs, or how deep are the tariff, and then with Doge cutting, eliminating potentially certain agencies and cutting back certain agencies. I think from a small business perspective, all these things here create uncertainties for small businesses. And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of concerns about, is this, should I stay in the government market, or should I leave the government market? Should I expand diversify my revenue sources? And we're going to cover some of these strategies in a little bit with you guys as well. But from that lens, right, in terms of how should small business react, or the mindset that small business should have, I'm going to share a few thoughts with everybody here. I'm going to use the investment world as an example. So if you're out there and all of your friends come to you and they say, hey, Lainey, you should buy this stock. It's going up. It's shooting. It's gonna go to the moon. You need to buy this stock right now. When everybody is telling you to buy a stock, what should you do?
Not buy it.
Don't buy it, right? Because if everybody's telling you to buy, that's the worst time to buy it. If everybody's telling you, oh, you gotta sell the stock here, it's tanking, it's going down, and that's probably the best time to buy if it's a real company.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the market as a whole and not react to all the daily news. Although we're going to share with you some news, but because news, well, things that's happening have impact, but at the same time, don't let it scare you, and don't let it run you away, because the best time to be in the government market is when everybody's getting out.
Yeah.
The best
Same thing
time
with real
to,
estate.
yes, they do with real estate, right? Because with because you have a real estate background, you have family that's in the real estate industry. I used to be in the real estate market. When everybody say, "Oh, you need to buy these homes in the city," and the prices are going up, that is the worst time to buy real estate. Same thing in
Mhm.
the government market. Lots of concern. People are like, "Oh man, I don't want to get into the government market right now because, or I'm leaving the government market because of all the chaos." That means there's less competition. That means people are not paying attention to the government market. This is the time to expand your footprint in the government market. And I'm gonna give you this real example, and then I'd love to hear your comments on this too, Lainey. So I remember the Great Recession. During the Great Recession, 2007, 2008, and leaning a little bit to 2009 and so forth. I met this business owner, and he had a hardware company, and all these small hardware shops were closing down, especially with Home Depot and with Lowe's, um, you know taking big part of the market share. Ace Hardware is changing their landscape a little bit, but some of the smaller mom and pop hardware stores were closing down during the Great Recession. So this small business owner, he said, Abe, I'm raising a lot of money uh, from my banks and my investors, because I am going to buy up all these small businesses that are closing down or planning to close down, so that I can increase my footprint. And as a result of that, his company grew when everybody was either slowing down or dying or died, and his company grew, and as the economy recovered, he became a larger corporation. So that's kind of my thoughts. Yes, be concerned. You do need to react. You do need to put some measures. You do need to diversify. We're talking about some practical strategies in a little bit, but you do need to do that there. So your thoughts, Lainey?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discourse going on. You're talking about this recession. A lot of people are saying the recession is coming. There I saw a news article maybe last week, and it was like it's going to be bigger than 2008 ever was. And there's that idea of we don't necessarily know what the future holds. If we did, this would be a different podcast, and we'd have probably have some different people watching it if we were, future tellers. But with that being said, I there's this quote, and I just sent it to my husband. I don't know who said it. I've tried to find who says it. I think it's maybe multiple people, but that millionaires are made in recessions.
Mhm.
And this idea that, going in to it, you kind of business people, they prepare, like they're saving for recessions, for if, like this guy you're talking about, so he can buy up these mom and pops or have the investors that know, like, this is a good idea. Or the idea in real estate, when homes start foreclosing on, that's when we want to get them. So, yes, it's an uncertain time, it's a scary time, but I think there's a lot of stuff you can do to prepare yourself for what the future could hold. But even right now, of my personal opinion on like the government contracting, and we've been seeing a lot of layoffs, and we talked about this in some of our Trump podcasts earlier this year. If you haven't checked that out, you should definitely do that. I'll put the link in the chat in just a few minutes. But this idea that they're gonna have to start contracting more stuff out if they don't have employees in-house, because they still have to run, they're laying off employees, and eventually it's gonna come to where they have to contract stuff out. So let your company be prepared for that. Have things in place that when those start hitting the sam.gov and are starting to be a lot of stuff that happens, you can be the one that gets those. So, and I think too, even with employees, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Abe, if you're, a government employee watching this, or maybe you've been laid off, this could be your time. You have a lot of experience coming in. You've worked in these offices, what's happening, that you could create your own company, whether it's you're an IT person, so you create your own IT company that ends up selling to the government, even an admin, they do billing admin. The government subcontracts everything out. Or not
Mhm.
they not everything that they do, but there's jobs for everything. If you were in janitorial and you've been laid off, well, great. Let's look at creating you a janitorial service to instead sell back to the government on multiple things. You don't just have to be in the office that you were in. What are your thoughts on that, Abe?
Well, that's actually there's a great example. So there's one of the agency, they laid off like a very small sub agency, and this is like some of the smartest technologists in the government market, and a handful of them got laid off because their whole small agency sub agency got laid off. So Mark Cuban reached out to them. Mark Cuban said, I would like to make a recommendation for all of you to start a company together, and I will invest in your company,
Wow.
right? Because he understands that these are really smart people in the working in the government market, but now they've been laid off. They're prime candidates to take the services that they were doing, or the same function that they were doing in the government market, and privatize that, and let a multi-billionaire invest in their company so they can and Mark Cuban's comment is this here. He says that in the very near future, the same government agency that fired you will want you to go back
Yeah.
and be a contractor back to them, right? So yes, I think there's lots of things going on as it relates to that there. And last comment about the federal employees being laid off. Some of the best thing that's ever happened to in my situation and to people I've known is that when you get fired from a corporate job, or in this situation from a federal job, that may be the best thing to happen in
Yeah.
your life, because you were hanging on to uh, a I'm going to retire from the federal government in 20 years and 30 years or whatever, and now all of a sudden you don't have the option anymore. It allows you to think out of the box, and you get to reinvent yourself. And for the people that the entrepreneurs I know that came out as a result of, they were either downsized or they were fired or laid off from different corporate jobs, who are running multi-million dollar corporations today, that same thing happened. Let me share a true story. So young lady
I
named
love I love your true stories. Anytime we're talking about something, I'm like, give me these little bits of true stories because Abe has seen it all and he has a story for everything, and I love that. It's one of my favorite parts of getting to talk to him. So yes, tell us a true story.
Absolutely. So this is her name is Tasha Reed, and in the real estate recession, right during the 2008 Great Recession, she was a real estate investor, and her whole portfolio uh, got demolished, and she lost homes, she lost her investment properties, all of these different things happened. And so I was doing a class, and she came to the government contracting class, and after the class, she said, Abe, you used to be in real estate, now you're in government contracting. I want to get to government market. And she told me her story. She lost everything. She was devastated. She lost everything. And I said, well, what do you want to do? She said, I want to start a business. And I said, okay, if you want to start a business, get to government market, I can help you. So she started a company called Visionary Services. And you can go to her website, visionaryservices.net. She is doing about 11 to 12 million dollars a year now, all because she went through a devastation, which allowed her to reinvent herself, think out of the box, and she's doing something completely different. Yes, she did go through some hard times, but hard times are not meant to kill us, right? Hard times are not meant to keep us down. Hard times are meant to make us more resilient, make us more stronger, allow us to reinvent ourselves and be a better version of who we are. So potentially, if from the right perspective, I believe that all these different chaos, all these different challenges, whether you're federal employees getting laid off, you might become a government contractor, you might start a business, you might go out there and do consulting work for the same agency that you're working with. You come and work for a company, consult with them, and help them get into the same agency. If you're a former contract officer or a former director, all these things are positive thoughts as it relates to reinventing yourself during challenging times.
Yeah, no, I think so completely. And once again, we want this place to be we want our podcast and even GCA, we want it to be about positivity. What can you do to shift if you do come through a hard time? We don't want to be focusing on negative, focusing on this fear mongering that we see so much. And so, yes, we do talk about current events, but we want you to spin it of these are opportunities no matter what happens. Like you're saying, if you get laid off, which I personally, I have never went through a layoff. I've had some in my family, so I dealt with that. But I can only imagine, the devastation, just feeling down about yourself, not knowing what tomorrow holds. But we want this to be a positive place for you to come. We can kind of help you to get back on your feet. That's what we are at GCA. We want to help people. We want to lead you in the right direction to government contracting. So just knowing that there is, the grass is greener on the other side, as cliche as that is. And I know in the moment it definitely does not feel that way, but it can be. So, Abe, let's kind of get into talking about, if you're joining us, first off, if you're joining us, just coming on, thank you so much. You're watching back. Make sure to put your name, company, where you're joining us from. We love seeing everybody in the comments. But another thing is Abe, maybe you're joining us here and you've actually had a contract that has been dismissed. Or you've been affected by these agencies closing and the layoffs and everything as a government contractor. So what are some steps that people can take? And I know that you've worked with some people in the last, since January of, this is real life, like this has happened to you, you've kind of advised on this and kind of taught some things. So what can you share with us on the best way to move forward with that?
Sure. So I'm gonna go through a few things. I'm gonna talk about small businesses and the small business certification program, the potential impact on that, and then we're gonna talk about termination. If your contract got terminated, what should you do to address those terminated contracts there? So I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides, and we're gonna dive in and talk a little bit about the impact of what's going on as it relates to small business certifications, and then we're going to shift gears and talk about termination. If your contract got terminated, what should you do? So, all right, almost ready.
And Abe, do you want to I mean, we know contract termination, that's kind of straightforward, but maybe explain a little bit if people are coming in, maybe they're not familiar with the contracting world of what that looks. What is it? What does it mean to have a contract terminated, and why is that happening at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I will talk about that after I talk about small business. So yes, I definitely
Okay.
want to talk about that there, so everybody can kind of better understand what that is. But first, for some of you who are small business owners, I'm going to talk about it from the are small business certifications at risk? And some of you want to, you're thinking about that. Some of you are thinking about getting your business certified. Some of you are small business that have certifications, and you're thinking like, can I still use my small business certifications? What are some of the risk? Uh, if I have a contract, can I lose it, and so forth? So I want to address this a little bit. Laying down the groundworks a little bit, I want to talk about the DBE program first, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. The disadvantaged business enterprise is mainly used for state contracting purposes. The bulk of it is used for DOT contracts, and it is normally managed by the Federal Highway Authority. And if we follow the flow of money, the federal government funds a lot of the road works that happens all throughout different states and so forth. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars that goes from the US DOT to the state, and then from the state to different counties and cities and so forth. So funding for road work and bridges and maintaining interstates and local works, county work, road work as well, a lot of it comes from the federal market or the federal agency. So US DOT mandated and created the DBE program so that these contract opportunities can flow to small businesses. So that's really the heart behind the DBE program. Different states, some states don't want the DBE certification program. And like, for example, Lane and I were in the state of Georgia.
Hmm.
And I remember the state of Georgia back in 2012-ish, somewhere around that time, they tried to say, we don't want the DBE program in the state of Georgia. But you can't just say, we're going to get rid of it, right? Because the federal government mandates it. And again, the goal behind the DBE program is to make sure that some of these federal funding goes into the hands of small businesses as well. So, because most contracts are won by large companies. So the state of Georgia, and they did the market research, and they realized that the bulk, almost all of the contracts for road and highways and bridges were going to big corporations. So they couldn't justify getting rid of the DBE program. So the DBE program continued to continue to exist in the state of Georgia and in all states actually. So 40 to 50% of fundings for rural comes from the US DOT. So with this here, I believe that the DBE program, which exists for road work, also goes into the airport, right? So the airport, there's 50,000 DBE certified company approximately, because DBE companies are managed by every different states, all the different states. So there's no exact count because some states do a better job reporting the numbers and so forth. But also through the FTA, they also mandate that any contractors doing work at the airports, there's the ACDBE certification program, which is the Airport Concessionary Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. There's about 3,500 of ACDBE certified companies, and a lot of funding goes into the airport from the federal government as well. So you got these two certifications. If you want to do work, whether it's concessionary or if you want to do janitorial work at an airport, having the ACDBE is a great certification. If you want to do work for the state DOT, having the DBE certification is a very important certification to have. But will these certifications be at risk? My personal opinion is that they're going to weather through all these changes and not much is going to happen to them. But I do believe that of all the certifications out there, I believe that the DBE, ACDBE may be the greatest at risk. And we'll talk about 8A, women-owned, SDVSB, HUBZO in a little bit, but because some states are already, because that means that the burden is on the states to make sure that contracts go to small businesses through the DBE program. Most states don't want, some states do want it. Some states welcome the DBE program, but some states don't want it. And so it can be initiated at the state level to where they say, hey, you know what? They may be preemptive in this process. They say, hey, we don't want the DBE program, and they're going to phase it out, or they're going to reduce, or they're not going to focus on getting contracts with DBE certified company. So that's my own personal opinion on it. My first thought is nothing's going to happen to it. It's going to continue to exist. But if some states may be preemptive and minimize it or try to get rid of it previously with other states in the past. So that's kind of my thoughts on this here. Do you have any thoughts on this here, Lainey, as it relates to the DBE program?
Yeah, so I actually have a question, that let's and this is just, hypothetical, but let's say, Georgia gets rid of their DBE program. I have a company in Georgia, but I don't just do work in Georgia, I do work kind of all over the Southeast. Am I able to kinda change, like, go to Florida and have their DBE, change my business to Florida? Is that something you're able to do to try to, like, get around this, or is that really not allowed?
The DBE program is a nationwide program. So if you get DBE certified in the state that your business is located in, but you can also get what they call a reciprocity program, where if you're certified in Georgia, you can get a simple 1 or 2 page application in another state, and then they will extend your DBE certification to that state. And so you can do this for all 50 states. If your footprint grows and you go from one state to a 2 or 3 a regional company that have bigger footprint, doing more road work and more construction work, and sometimes DBE actually goes beyond construction work itself. Sometimes some
Mhm,
states use it for administrative management work, IT work, and so forth. But I would say the bulk of DBE work goes for construction related work. So yes, you can expand to other states and use a DBE certification for that purpose. Now, I say it's at risk. I personally don't think it's going to disappear or it's going to go away. So that's
yeah.
just. But I think it's the greatest at risk because there has been patterns where some states have been trying to dismantle it in the past.
Yeah, so I had another thought too when you were talking, and then we actually have a question in the chat, so we'll get to that after
Mhm.
this thought. So you had mentioned, some states they don't necessarily love the DB, but it's this idea of as a contracting officer, and we've talked about this a lot. At the end of the day, it is, and you can agree. I think you'll agree with me that it's easier for a contracting officer a lot of times to work with these huge companies because there's a lot more people, they've done a lot of stuff. There's just like a flow. If you've worked with somebody before, you know how it works. So I think now more than ever, it's so important as a small business to make sure you are on your P's and Q's. You are really focused on doing things the correct way, following instructions and just making that a great process for a contracting officer working with you or even in the bidding process and anything because like you said, the it could be at risk. We don't think anything's going to happen, but that's important. It's always been important to be exemplary in your work and what you do, but I think now is it really is important.
Yeah, the when things are tough, especially contracting officers are being scrutinized right now. They're looking for the most qualified companies, and then the certification open doors for you to at least get the first view because of the set aside goals and so forth. Most states have a DBE goal of 10% to
Mhm.
award contracts to DBE certified companies, about 10% of the total budget. And every state has their own total, budget as it relates to construction work for DBE companies. Yeah, so I think there are some things you can do, making sure that you're in compliance, making sure that you position your business to thrive in this current market. Let's talk
So
about, go ahead.
we have a question.
Okay.
So somebody asked, "What is the first thing I need to be doing in order to get started, like in the government market?" And I'm going to answer this first, and then I want Abe to kind of
Mhm.
say this. If you are brand new to the government market, you don't know anything about it. We actually offer two courses for this. So we offer a CCM course, which is a certified capture manager, and then we offer a prep, which is more a hands-on course. So we have resources, as you're kind of just you're learning about it, you're wanting to get into it, make sure you're doing things the right way. But then, Abe, if you want to answer, what is the first thing, if you're not going to take a course, what is the first thing you would do to get started in the government market?
Well, one is we said it earlier, this is the best time to get to the government market. When people are, there's trepidation, when people are like, oh, should I stay in the government market or should I leave the government market? This is the best time to get into the government market. Why? Because you're going to set yourself apart from everybody else. When people are afraid and concerned, this is the time to be bold and courageous. And so yes, this is the right time to get into the government market. And I remember during the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, 2009, a lot of companies shifted from the private sector into the government market because they realized that, the economy will ebb and flow. Government contracting will always be here. And so now to get started, one is to do what you're doing, right? Invest in your knowledge. Uh, Use your time to keep learning. I call it learning to speak governese. You have to learn to speak the language of contracting. And contracting officer, they speak governese or they speak FAR E's, right? The Federal Acquisition Regulation, and generally we call that governese. And if I remember I used to watch Game of Thrones way back in the days when it was still like the most popular show in the world, and they learned uh, Dothraki for the show itself. They came up with 3,500 words.
Wow.
So you have to, as an actor or actress, you have to learn 3,500 words to speak it, and it's a made up word, right? It's a made up
Language,
tribe.
yeah.
It's a made up language, and people invest to learn all these different words so they can actually have this fake conversation in Dothraki. So if people are willing to do that, so as a starting point, invest in learning governance, right? That's the first step, and you're doing that by attending this podcast or watching this, these episodes and other things. But the best part is find a community. Find a community, be a part of that. Laney's going to put our community page there. We have a community of government contractors. We bring in professional peoples. We bring in small business owners, large corporation, and we help create an ecosystem so that people can interact and support each other. So that and there's a lot more. The other thing is set up a time with either Lane or myself, and we'll talk to more practicals for you. But let's continue. Let's go into the 8A program. So the 8A certification program has been around for a long time. It is the first formal certification program that was created for federal contracting purposes. And for today, I won't go into the whole history of the 8A program, but currently there's about 5,800 8A certified companies right now. So one of the big changes is that under the Biden administration, the goal was to increase contract opportunities to SDB, small disadvantaged businesses, which 8A companies are a subset of small disadvantaged businesses. And the goal was to get to 5%, 15% under the Biden administration. Well, when Trump took office in January 25th, he says, you know what, we're going to reduce it back down to the normal 5%. So this is the first big change with the 8A certification program from a certification contracting purposes. So there are some potential. I think the 8A program does have some issues because historically, I would say 99.5% of all the 8A companies I know are owned by minority-owned businesses or businesses with social economic disadvantage. Coming from that perspective there. But I think again, these are my opinion. There's not a legal basis for my opinion here, but it's just through experience and through my own knowledge of the government contracting industry. I believe that the 8A program is not going anywhere because it got changed a year and a half ago when Ultima sued the USDA and the SBA, saying that the 8A program, there was a presumption of social disadvantage, meaning that if you were Asian American, Hispanic American, African American, or from certain countries, you were automatically presumed socially disadvantaged, and that you did not need to prove that you were socially disadvantaged. Well, the court case with Ultima versus SBA changed that policy to where everyone has to prove that they are socially disadvantaged. And so they took the presumption. And so my own personal opinion is that court case actually will save the 8A program because now it's no longer presumption of because you are from a certain social demographic that you can get into the 8A program from a social perspective. And now all you have to do is prove that you're not a multimillionaire, the economic side of it. So that's my own personal opinion that the 8A program will not go away anywhere because of that. Now, although we do have a president, and through the stroke of a pen, he can say, I'm going to do an executive order and change things. But because it's a congressionally mandated program, anything that's congressionally mandated, there is a process to get rid of something. So if he does create if there is an executive order to get rid of the 8A program, businesses can challenge that, Congress can challenge that, and it will go through a court process. But based upon that, I don't see the 8A program going anywhere. So thank you to the, it was a negative thing back in the past for Ultima sue the SBA, USDA, but I think it's coming back to save the 8A program itself. So my thoughts on that there. 8A program is the strongest certification of all the program out there. And mainly because most sole source contracts are done through the 8A program. Let's talk about SDVSB. SDVSB service disabled, very own small businesses, and the VOSB certification program. There's about 7,000 SDVSB, VOSB certified companies out there. And for this year, you have to be a veteran. And then if you have any disability, whether it's 0.00001, as long as you have any disability and you have documentation, medical documentation to demonstrate that, you can get into the SDVSB program. Now, today, I'm not talking about how to qualify and the benefits and all these different things. I'm talking about the impact from all the different changes, uh, how that will impact veteran-owned businesses. My thought on this here is that there's about 15.8 million veterans out there. The veteran community, work as one voice very often. They have a very strong voice. There's veterans all throughout government, although the VA is going through some changes from some employment and people being fired and changing to VA, some VA policy and so forth. I don't believe the SGVSB certification program will go anywhere because this is a very important certification to uplift the business owners who are our veterans. They put their lives on the line for our nation, and I don't believe any congressman is brave enough and bold enough, although I do believe that Trump is crazy enough to try to get rid of it. But I don't personally think he's going to do anything with that there. Uh, Partly because of the VA. The veteran has the Vet First program. The Veteran Administration has the Vet First program, where about 28% of VA contracts are going to veteran-owned businesses. So as a whole, there's a 3% set aside for SDVSB. But from the VA, they award almost 30% of all their contract goes to veteran and SDVSB companies out there. So the support for veteran-owned business will continue to be strong. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. The DoD represents $445 billion out of the $754 billion from fiscal year, which is about almost 60%, right? 59% of all awards in government contract is done through DoD, and DoD goes back and ties back to the veteran community. And so the DoD, the VA, they're going to look out for their own people, and I believe that nothing's going to change with the SWSB, even though through the stroke of a pen, things can happen. I personally don't think anything's going to happen here. Now, let's talk about the Hub Zone, the EDWSB, and the WSB program here. So there's currently 336 active Hub Zone certified companies out there. And Hub Zone stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. Is meant to uplift businesses that are located in um, economically depressed community. Every 7 years, I believe, the census is done for economic purposes. Every 10 years, people census is done, but I believe maybe 5 years or 7 years. But it's either 5 years or 7 years. The business census is done, and through that, they designate certain areas of the community that are underutilized in terms of for business and economic purposes. So the hub zone map declares all the different locations. If your business is located in a hub zone, you can get certified as a hub zone company. Throughout my 15 years of doing government contracting work, I have never seen the government meet the hub zone set aside goal of 3%. So this is one of the most powerful certification you can have, and the greatest needed certification in the government market itself, because so few companies are certified in this year. Compare this year to 8A, right? 58 8A certified company, 7,000 veteran certified company, HubZone 336. So I love this certification program. Personal opinion, is probably not going to go anywhere. Now let's talk about the women-owned certification. In fact, next week we're going to talk about, in honor of Women, History Month. Next week we're going to talk about deeper dive into the women entrepreneurs in the government market. We're going to look at some case studies, some companies that are successfully winning government contracts. We're going to talk about the WSB certification, the EDWSB certification next week in our podcast, and we're going to just celebrate women entrepreneurship as a whole. So join us next week for that episode. But for this week, there's in talking about, will the current administration and Doge eliminate or diminish the WSB program? There's about almost 14,000 women-owned certified companies out there. Historically, there has been more, but because of in the past, it has been an informal, what we call self-certification program, meaning that you can just say, hey, I'm a women-owned business and I'm I'm certified as a woman-owned business. It's self-certification. They formalized this here a few years ago to where you actually have to go through a formal process to get approved, and the SBA have to review your documentation to make sure that you're before you become a certified WSB or EDWSB company. So this year, women entrepreneurship probably not going to go anywhere. Because women represents almost 51% of the population. Women, you guys are awesome. You guys are powerful as one voice. And so because of that, I really don't think that the WSB program is going to go away anywhere. So from a federal perspective, the 8A is probably at the greatest risk. HubZone maybe second. EDWS and VSB probably not going anywhere anytime. Regardless of who's in office, the community behind the women entrepreneurship and VOSB is just too great. So, Lainey, comments on this here?
Yes, so I went through the application process and everything, and it was you have interviews and everything like that. But I agreed that I don't foresee, women-owned small business going anywhere, especially I know we're not going to dive into this because we're talking about it next week, but there's a lot of talk about this great wealth transfer that women are going to own 75% of assets. They you- at the end of the day, women are going to own more things than men, so they can't necessarily, like you said, together we stand strong. So, well, join us next week. I don't. We could talk about, or I could talk about that for hours and hours. So we'll save that for next week and continue on with this topic.
Sure. So, with that, let's shift to termination of contracts. Now, people or maybe you receive a stop work order on a contract that you're on. Or you may have seen a termination letter from a contracting officer to terminate your existing contract, or of people that have gone through that process. So here I want to talk about what should you do or how to prepare yourself should you get terminated, whether it's now or into the future. These things that we're going to talk about at this point here, you need to know about these topics here and how to deal with this situation if your contract is terminated. Now, there's two types of termination. There's what's called T for D, termination for default. Now, termination for default is a type of termination where your business defaulted on a contract or you failed to perform according to the statement of work. And the contract officer will terminate your contract because you did not cure the problems. Now, it's extremely rare that anyone would just get terminated for default because there's a process behind that, right? They will say, hey, there's a problem here, please fix it. Because the contract officer does not want to terminate for default because that means the work still has to happen. And if you can't do it, then they will have to find someone else to do it. They may have to put it up for rebid. So they don't want to go through the whole process. So most of the time, it's very rare that I see a termination for default. Only under extreme situation where a contracting company just refused to comply with the request by the contracting officer. So termination for default, that's not what I'm talking about here. What I am talking about is termination for convenience, or T for C. So under FAR 52249-2, most of all your contracts that you receive from the government will have this FAR clause in there. And it will say that the government has every right to terminate a contract at any time for any reason, or they don't even have to give a reason. They can terminate just because it's convenient on their behalf. Now, typically, this does not happen. Under normal situation, it's extremely rare where I've seen T for C. And in my 15 years, I would say of the 16,000 companies that I have worked with, I've seen less than 10 companies that have gone through a T for C. Now, in these last few months, I have seen more than that or heard of more than that in these last few months in terms of members of our community, business owners that we work with, coaching clients and friends that's in the government market. They would say, hey, I just lost my contract. In fact, one of my business partner, he just got terminated a $3 million contract. he says, hey, I just lost my $3 million contract. So it is going right now, termination for convenience. So what should you do if your contract gets terminated? Well, first you have to understand that it's within the government's right to do that. But they have to formally notify you. They can't just pick up the phone and say, hey, you've been terminated. They can't just send you an email and say, hey, your contract's been terminated. There is a formal process and they have to follow the process. So if you do get a termination, there's some steps you have to do before you just stop work, right? So do not stop work just because a contracting officer sends you an email or makes a verbal phone call and say you need to stop. There's a formal process. It falls under FAR 49.102. So, but what is that? How do you respond if you do receive a stop work or a termination for convenience? This is the process that you have to go through, right? You have to acknowledge receipt, you have to confirm validity, you have to seek clarification, then stop the work, notify your subcontractor, review the documents to make sure how that's going to impact your organization, and then pursue adjustments and finalize the agreement. So what does that look like? So practically, if you receive a stop work or termination for contract, you have to acknowledge that you received it and write back to the contracting officer to let them know that you received the termination for contract. And then you want to confirm and have them formalize this process with you that they are officially terminating the contract or stop work itself. Then once it's confirmed, then you move to the next part, right? Because you may have a $10 million contract. They may not terminate all of it. They might
Mhm.
terminate part of it. They might terminate instead of um, if it's a 5-year contract, they might terminate 4 years. They might not terminate the current year. So there's different perspective around termination. You want clarification on that there. Uh, on a stop work order, it's the same thing. You want to clarify the scope of the termination. If it's total termination or stop work, or is it just partial? You might have 10 employees and two of them might be deemed essential that work cannot stop. 8 might be deemed unessential or non-essential, and work must stop with those 8 people. So seek clarification. And then once that is confirmed, then you stop work immediately on the portion that was terminated or stopped. And then at this point here, you want to notify your subcontractors within 24 hours because your subcontractors are relying on you to give them the message. If you don't notify them, guess what? They're going to continue to do work because you have subcontractors out there every day doing work for you. And if you don't notify them, then you are at risk of continuing to pay them, even though the governments have stopped, the work have stopped for you. And they're not going to pay you beyond the stop work order or beyond the termination date, and your contractors are still going to facilities or still going to do janitorial work or still going to do construction work or still doing IT support work, and you're still obligated to pay your subcontractor if you don't do a stop work order for them as well. And you want to notify them that, hey, the government have terminated the contract for convenience. Please, uh, this is a formal notification for the government. Please stop work immediately so that they can stop work as well. Now, you want to work with them, why, right? Because you are losing money and they're losing money as well. So you want to start documenting the cost and you want to create a schedule of what's happening. And so, and what do I mean by document the costs? So, for example, if your subcontractor is doing work, you need to document all the work that they've done. And if you have done work, because you might be performing 70% of the work and your sub might be performing 30% of the work, you want to start documenting these different things and then um, see what the potential impact will be for your company and for your subcon. You have to take care of your subcontractor in this process. Don't abandon your subcontractors. Just like you don't want them to abandon you on a project, right? You want a contract, you're depending yourself to fulfill the contract. You don't want them to abandon you in those moments. Do not abandon your subcontractors in the process. work with them and communicate with them so that there can be resolution for your company, and resolution for your company also means resolution for your subcontractors. And I'll come back and address that in a little bit as well. So you do have rights. You can do what's called an REA, right? Request for equitable adjustment. And an REA is a request for equitable adjustment under normal situation. But in terms of a termination for convenience, you can do what's called a termination settlement. And you can, but you have to notify the contracting officer within 30 days that you intend to seek a termination settlement with the government. And so you have to let the government know, because if you don't let them know, they just think it's ended, it's over, right? And they're just going to say, okay, invoice us and be done with it. And so, but you don't want to just start invoice them to that date. There's other things you can recoup, and let's talk about that here, right? You want to set up a TSP, a termination separation proposal. So the proposal goes before the settlement itself. So you're going to create a TSP, termination separation proposal, and you're gonna take all the costs that your subcontractors have done, and then you're going to help guide your subcontractors in terms of how they can prepare these documentation, so that, and then you'll prepare your documentation so that you can get what's properly coming to you. So what does that process look like? So there's different form, SF 1436, SF 1439. These are documentation that you use and your subcontractors will use so that you can get proper um, payment for the work that has been done, and additional other things as well, which we'll talk about in 1 second. So 1436, if a subcontractor, if you owe them, if they've done more than 50,000 of work, then they will need a separate SF 1436 with your 1436. If it's less than that, then under your 1436, you can just include your subcontractors and the work that they've done in that cost allocation there. Now, SF stands for standard form. Standard form 1436, standard form 1439. You can actually download this here. In fact, I'm going to pause for a second here. I'm going to put this link in the chat so that you guys have access to this here. If you're watching this on replay, you'll just look in the description area. We'll add it to the description area as well. Those of you who are joining us live, you can actually use these forms here as part of your, or save it, save it for future purposes, should you ever encounter such a situation. So in your TSP, there are some costs that you can recoup. So there's direct costs, there's indirect costs, and there's settlement expenses. So for example, you don't want to go at this alone. This is you're already under a lot of stress, because now you have to communicate to your contractors, to your subcontractors, to some of the employees that are working for you, that you have to let them go. All this here, you need a team of professionals to help you with this process. So as it relates to the TSP, you want to engage an attorney that understands rules and regulations, the FAR acquisition regulation, procurement regulations in the federal marketplace itself. So you want to engage an attorney. And if you don't have an attorney, reach out to us. We can connect you to different attorneys that specialize in this area here. And when you engage an attorney, you can recoup that cost. It does not have to come out of your pocket, or you do need to retain the attorney. It may cost you a little bit of money to retain the attorney at the beginning, unless you negotiate with the attorney to do it upon payment from the government. And some attorneys may work with you because they understand you're under a lot of stress. They understand that you're under a lot of challenges at this time. And some attorneys will work with you because they know that if they work with you, they will get paid from the government. And so they will take you on contingent upon getting funding from the government or receiving funds from the government. So retain an attorney to help you with this process, take some of the stress away. And instead of you navigating the forms and all that by yourself, attorney can help you. You can also engage consultants. What type of consultants? For example, a payroll, an HR consultant. You have to look through indirect costs, your direct costs. You have to look at your profit margins. You have to get all these different things in place. And there's all these different matters that you're not an expert in. You're not an expert when it comes to deciphering direct costs and breaking out indirect costs and allocating, your G&A from the overall company G&A to the G&A that's tied specifically to that project that's been terminated. You need an expert, and you can recoup that cost from the government because yes, it was termination for convenience, but it created inconvenience for you. And in the TSP, in your settlement, you can recoup that cost from the government. So there's other type of costs that you can recoup from the government as well. Talk to your attorney, and they can tell you what are the other type of expenses that you can recoup. Now, you can also recoup profit, right? Now, profit is not future profit; it's based upon the work that you've done. So, and then you use historical profit margins. Like if you've been on if you have a 5-year contract and your profit margins for the last 2 years and you have 3 years remaining, if your profit margin has been about 15%, you can recoup 15%, and you can bill the government for the 15% of the profit margins that you're losing. So you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to recoup the next 3 years profit." You can't do that, but you can recoup all the work that's been done and the profit that's tied to the work that's been done. So there's different things that you can do as it relates to that. Now, one other very important thing that you can recoup is, let's assume that you brought on additional costs, right? Let's assume you won a $20 million contract. To do that, you brought in an attorney, in-house attorney. You lease an office space for 5 years because the contract is for 5 years. So you went out and leased an office space for 5 years. You hire more people, more admin people, more operational people to support that contract, even though they're not, because that's tied to G&A, right? That's tied to your overhead. That's not necessarily direct cost to the project itself, but it's still part of your overhead. So these are the things that you can negotiate. If you have 3 years left on the lease, you can negotiate for them to cover for the 3 years. If the leasing company, the property manager, won't let you out of the lease, that's an obligation that you bound to yourself because of the contract. You can recoup those type of expenses. So yes, be concerned, but get the help so that you're not distraught. So now you have 30 days to notify the contract officer that you want to seek a termination settlement, but you have up to 1 year to actually complete the settlement with the government. So you don't want to finalize it too quickly because there may be additional costs that you may not see immediately. Now, for some of you, you may take a different approach. If you're a small business and you say, "I cannot survive for the next year if I don't get some money coming in," so you can initiate a what's called a interim proposal with the government, and so you can use SF 1034 and do a partial payment, and then look for the long-term settlement down the road. So there are some things, some immediate things that you can do, uh, so that you're not necessarily waiting, 6 months, 12 months from now. Now, sometimes you want to wait 6 months, 9 months, because you have to wind down the contract, unwind that project there, and it takes time to unwind certain things. Now, the other reason why you might want to expedite this here is because all of a sudden there's thousands of contracts being terminated, and you might want to be first in line. So you might not
Mhm.
want to wait 6 months or 9 months from now because there's a backlog of, and especially some federal employees are getting fired. So there's a backlog. So you might want to act sooner than later for that reason. But if you can weather it and make sure you capture all your expenses and recoup as much as you can, then do stall it and just notify in 30 days you're going to seek a settlement, and then you can take your time up to a year to do that there. So these are some tactics, right? But let's talk about, how do you mitigate risk? One is, with all the craziness that's going on, you do want to diversify your revenue stream. I know some of you are 100% in the federal market. Some of you are 100% in the SLED market. Federal budget gets cut, SLED markets, some SLED market projects will get cut too, especially DOT related stuff. So, so you need to diversify from federal, add some SLED work to it, add some private sector work to it. It's always good to diversify. Multiple streams of income is always a wise decision. So for the companies that are already diversified, perfect. Like I'm one of the companies I'm coaching. She historically has been a private sector company, most of her work in the private sector, and she's expanding into the federal market. And I said, hey, during this time here, you might want to spend, because she's 8A certified, she does not want to waste her 9 years in the 8A program. I said, you might want to spend, generally under normal situation, I make this recommendation. 80% of your focus at the federal level, 20% at the SLED and private sector market. Why? Because the federal has better profit margins and generally, and the federal have true set aside goals for small businesses and true subcontracting goals for small business. What the private sector, there is no such thing. The MBE, the WBE certifications are goals. They're not necessarily mandated, congressionally mandated. So 80% federal, 20% SLED and private sector. Under this current market, you might want to adjust that. You might want to do 60% federal, 20% SLED, and 20% private sector. So diversify. This is the time to diversify a little bit from which market to build your practice. And then also you want to diversify your services and your product offering as well. So expand your offerings. If you were a DI company, right, in the middle of chaos, there's opportunities. So some companies I know, they specialize in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Under the Trump administration, it's all about MEI instead of DEI. MEI stands for merit, excellence, and intelligence, right? So it's a different perspective, different approach. And so it's under MEI. And so as a DI trainer, you might want to support training on change management, because all these corporations, all these different government contractors, the different agencies, they're all going through change right now. So do your consulting work for change management. Do workforce development, right? Federal employees are getting laid off. They need to reskill. They need to go back to school. Do workforce development training. Do career training. So the different things that you can shift into based upon what market you're in and how do you adjust it to a different market. It just all depends on how do you navigate this space here. So with that, Lainey, any thoughts, comments on this here? And then we'll have some few closing comments before we wrap up today's episode.
No, I don't think I have anything else, but thank you so much, Abe. I think this is really needed in everything that's going on right now. And like we said, I think the biggest thing, if you're in contracting, wanting to get in contracting, it's to keep going. I know you're pulling up something we have really, it's our community. So we kind of already talked about that the biggest thing, you need a community. You need somebody that's going to lead you forward, being surrounded with like-minded people. And that's what we are at the Government Contracting Association. We also have these classes we've talked about, but you're going to show us a really cool tool that we have been working on. So go ahead and do that.
Yes. So one thing we've done is we've aggregated a lot of news so that you don't have to go out there and look for news out there. So, for example, there is a pending government shutdown right now, and the House just approved a funding bill for 6 months. It's going to the Senate anytime now. Will that pass? We may have a government shutdown, right? Because end of March is potentially a government shutdown. So we need to have a continuing resolution very quickly, or we need to approve a funding budget very quickly. But all these things here, all things that's related to government contracting, we aggregate into one place. So if you want to say, okay, what's going on? How do I stay on top of what's going on? Lainey and I, we highlight a few different topics when we do the podcast, but lots of different things are happening. So you can pay attention to here. I'll put the link to the news, our news summary here, so that you can always, stay on top of what's going on. But we invite you to become part of the community, because as part of the community, there's events. We've aggregated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events that's happening in the government market all over the country in all different areas. So if you just want to learn, right, we have our events too, but we aggregate all the events that's happening in the government market into one place. So you can come in here and look to see what's happening in the government market. And so we're going to give you a link to the community, and we're going to give you for all of you who are interested in being part of the community, we're going to give you a 50% discount to be part of the community. And then this discount will go away very soon. So this is an opportunity to become part of the community. To do certain things on community is free. So some things that you can do in the community is free. And so, but many other things in the community, because how we fund what the work we do is part of this is through the community itself. So this is how you get back to us by being part of the community, adding value, getting the community is here to help you, right? We've got Teaming Tuesdays. You can come and pitch your services, pitch for teaming partners on Teaming Tuesday. The next Teaming Tuesday is going to happen in April. We have job boards. You can come in here. You can ask questions, get help. So this is your community. It's not really our community. This is your community. So come and leverage the community to help you and your organization. The link to the community will be available to you. So go up there, get set up, and hang out with us in the community. So with that, Lane,
How
any final comments?
Yeah, so, how do they get 50% off?
We do have a link, and so we're going to give everybody the link to the community, and it's a 50% coupon link. So, do you have that queued up to give it to everybody?
No, I do not, but I will get it right quick.
Yep. So if you hang out with us, we're going to do that. We're going to give you that special discount link to be part of the community. It is 50% off, and so it's really affordable to be part of the community. And we do that because we feel that by creating an ecosystem in the government contracting marketplace, you as a business owner, one, will be smarter. Two, will have people to support you in the community. We bring in attorneys, we bring in CPAs, DCA expert, a CMMC cybersecurity expert, a certification specialist, all the different things that you would need to strengthen your business and to grow your organization can be found through the community. And so as an association, you actually have two membership in the association and membership in the community itself. So it's really two membership in one, as a member of the community. So use this link here and hang out with us in the community. And with that, Lainey, you want to remind everybody what we're going to talk about next week, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yes, so next week we're gonna be talking about empowering women entrepreneurs to succeed as government contractors. You're definitely gonna wanna be here. We're also gonna be talking about, woman-owned business certification. So, if it doesn't have to be that you're already certified in the government market. This is getting into that government market, why it's important. And so we're really excited about that. I'll put that link once again in here, and we hope to see you next week. And remember, you are only one grant away.
And one contract away from your goals, from all the things you want to do in life, the car that you want, the house that you want, the new employees that you want, all the things you want to accomplish, one grant, one contract away. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you in another episode. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.